Yep, so hi Caitlin, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Although I got caught out in the rain earlier on and got drenched.
Yeah, no, much the same. Well, I mean, it's just like that kind of rain that sits on you.
Yeah, definitely. Have you been in the office today? Is it an office?
Yeah, I've got an office. I'm not one for working at home. I don't get on well with it, and we've got a rota to keep people in the number of office people to a minimum, so we can work around that.
That's good that you can go in if you want to.
Yeah.
And get that right. And so have you? Yeah, so I was not on a study day today, but because we can work from home fairly easily, I worked from home this morning just because when I wake up I was like, ooh, no. And also the computers in our trust at the moment are having a hissy fit, so it's I don't want to walk to work and not be able to do what I want to do, so I just stayed here.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
So what is it that you do? Let's start off with the basics that I might understand. What's your specialism?
So my specialism is ophthalmology and vision science. And at least in my department, the end goal will be specialising within visual electrodiagnostics. So we're focused on sort of the electrophysiological responses of the cells at the back of the eye and the optic nerve, and going back to the brain. We kind of assess the function of that. A series of tests that kind of can separate different parts of the visual system and try and isolate where you might have an issue.
Yeah. So is that something that you specifically want to specialise into, or is that a lab thing that your lab is really renowned for?
So I think that's what everybody that does ophthalmology and vision science specialises into. I only say to them, I know for instance, our department, we're in medical physics, and we go to the eye. We have links to the eye department, but we're not part of the eye department where they do history and stuff. And I think down in Moorfields is a specialist eye hospital, and Gosh and stuff like that. I think they have closer links with their imaging department. I don't know if students would do imaging because obviously they have their own staff. But I think their involvement might be a little bit more. That's totally just because I can't confirm that. You'd have to get one of them. Because in our department, it's just really the electrophysiology that we would specialise in.
Yeah. So whereabouts are you based?
I'm based in Newcastle.
Okay. So did you move there for the STP, or were you kind of based there beforehand?
No, I moved from Glasgow. So
nice. Quite
a program in Scotland.
Quite a jump, but not all the way down to Southampton or something.
Nothing crazy.
Yeah. Cool. So what did you do before the STP then? Because it's quite a niche. I guess all the specialisms are a bit niche, but that one especially.
Yeah, it seems like that. So I've studied up in Scotland, and my degree was in neuroscience, just general. And I've never done anything. I've done bits of vision, obviously with the neuroscience, but I've never done anything specifically about vision. And I graduated last summer, and I applied to the STP, and I managed to get in, which was really fortunate. But yeah, no, I didn't have an overwhelming amount of background in that particular subject, but I guess I was kind of always interested in it, and it just seems really cool. And the more I read into it and more time I've been spending in it, I'm really happy with my decision and everything that's going on. I think that's the same for a lot of STPs, is that you obviously have an idea of what it's going to be, and then when you're in it, you really start to learn. You're like, great.
Yeah, that is really good. So if you had not as much experience in ophthalmology specifically, how did you kind of make yourself stand out on the scientific skills bit of the application?
Well, because I guess what we're specialising in is really electrophysiological recording, so I kind of talked a lot about that, and sort of the kind of clinical side of things and what I'd done. I'm trying to remember my application now.
Sorry.
I talked about a lot of EEGs and stuff like that we would do, recordings that I'd seen at university and projects and stuff. But I guess it was just, I think for me in my application, it was just a keenness that I was trying to get across, wanting to be there, wanting to learn. I talked about courses that I'd taken in Python and stuff like that, as part of my interest in science and technology and stuff. And I think that was what I was trying to get across, because I knew I was coming in from like maybe like a disadvantage point of not having a like loads of background. But I just wanted to get across that I was like wanting to learn.
I think in a way it's quite good though, because they can teach you like the correct or what they want to teach you straight from the start, and you've not come in with these like preconceptions of something else.
Yeah.
Cool. So do you get like up and close with, right, that's definitely not the right thing, but like up close with eyes, or do you deal with like the kind of readings?
So I mean, first year you're kind of just doing a lot of observing, I guess. But in terms of someone who's qualified, you're kind of, we see patients daily, and you're kind of up in their business, sticking electrodes on their head. We have gold foils. Probably the most invasive thing we do is the little gold foils that go in your eye. But we put numbing drops in before. So you can't feel it. It kind of feels like your eye just feels like stiff. It's really weird. I've had them in. And it's this little gold foil leaf, and you kind of just lower the eyelid and tuck it in. And that's what we use for retinal recordings.
Mm-hmm. So are you, what things do the patients come in for? Like, what are their complaints?
Well, we have like a whole host of things. So, I mean, I always kind of think you can get a lot from imaging and stuff in vision, like in fields tests, ZAs and stuff like that. The ophthalmologists and stuff can get quite a lot from that. So when we start to see people, it's really when they think there's like a functional deficit there. So we get a lot of genetic clinics in. In fact, the consultant that signs off on all our reports, he's a genetic we get a lot of things related to like inflammatory conditions. We get it's a bit of everything. And a lot of people, if they just can't work out what's wrong with them, they'll send them down and they'll be like query retinal, macular, or optic nerve, which is basically everything. They're like, which one? We don't know. So yeah, you kind of get a whole host of things coming down to it.
So is it like more cellular abnormalities then, like instead of like a lens displacement or something, or do you just see everyone?
Yeah, no, we would be seeing more people with like functional loss of vision, due to like their photoreceptors aren't working, or like ganglion cells in that make up their optic nerve are like becoming damaged, and kind of everything in between. Lots of different things. We have people with like, I know in our clinic we don't see a lot of, because there's not a lot of them in general, but we see people that have got this thing called late onset retinal degeneration, or LORD, and they're people with like a vitamin A deficiency that affects their photosignaling transduction. So I mean, I've not actually got to sit on one of them, but I know that they're talked about a lot. And again, that genetic that we're talking about, he's kind of one of the leading for that particular disease, which is why we probably do see who there is disease.
So is that one quite like easy to treat then? Do patients just take like vitamin A tablets, or is it not that simple?
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think that's just like the mechanism of action, but there's not really a lot you can do for them. I know they do like this weird test thing. I'm not a specialist on this, but anyway, so I could be.
Sorry.
I know they do this weird thing where they like if you patch one of their eyes, for instance. So one of the first things that goes with them, I think, is their rod responses. So they're photopics, like dark. No, sorry, not photopics, scotopics vision. So when they're in the dark, and then they basically patch one of their eyes, and when you're patching it, it like allows the buildup of vitamin A to, like, it takes them a long time to build up. I think it's something to do with that. And then basically when they patch it, they build up enough vitamin A that when you measure the response 24 hours later after being patched, you'll actually get a rod response for them for the little bit. But that's not a long-term suitable, because as soon as they light adapt, it's gone. So
are there treatments that you can kind of or therapies or anything that you can kind of signpost patients to if you find something wrong for other eye diseases?
Yeah, so like I was kind of saying, we get people that have had, I guess, like ischemic or occlusion events or inflammation and stuff like that, particularly like optic nerve and stuff. You can treat that with like steroids. So that's something that can be done for patients. And we have an inflammatory thing we see a lot, is we see a lot of birdshot patients. So they've got issues with the blood vessels at the back of their eye that can cause retinal damage, but they're on a constant treatment course.
Mm-hmm.
And they use our test to track how well the treatment's going. So we'll basically just be recording to look if there's any improvement in the responses from the last time we saw them, or if it's just stable. And based on that result, doctors will kind of, change their treatment for it. So yeah, there's sometimes things you can do for these things.
That's good. Do you just see adults, or do you do any like pediatric work as well?
Yeah, we have pediatric clinics that run one day definitely, and most times if we have enough patients, we'll run Mondays and Tuesdays. And those are obviously we do them as two testers. I've got to sit in on a couple of them. They seem very stressful. Something I really need to improve in, I think, is pediatrics. It's just a different ballgame when you're with kids.
Yeah. I guess you can be really good at communicating with adults, but trying then to communicate difficult topics, to be honest, and trying to get a child to sit still for long enough to actually measure anything.
Yeah, and the types of tests we do sometimes in kids, the only real test we'll do in them is sort of depends, especially the younger ones, maybe a VEP and an ERG, which is basically the VEP is basically like a checkerboard stimulus, and they have to just stare at a fixated point for 10 minutes with an eye patch on their eye, or if we could get one of their eyes covered. And so even just trying to get them to do that is can sometimes be a task. And then the full field ERG is basically just this big dome thing, and then it flashes lights in their eyes. We stick pads instead of the gold foil electrodes I told you about. We don't use them on kids generally because they're not well tolerated by them and it's not worth it. So we put just pads sort of under their eyes, which can kind of attenuate the responses. But I think there's exceptions for you kind of just put a caveat within the limits of pediatric testing, and you're kind of just looking for is the response there or not with pediatrics for us. We're not directly measuring anything accurate. Wouldn't want to say.
Honestly, I'm always impressed when people can do pediatric stuff. We get pediatric samples and prenatal samples and stuff like that, but we just get the blood, so it's fine. You don't have to actually try to take that blood. That would be a nightmare.
Yeah, no, I don't envy it. It's something I'm obviously going to have to get better at, but slowly but surely.
Yeah, definitely. It'll come with time, I'm sure.
Yeah. I also don't have a lot of younger siblings in my family, so it's not used to being around small kids as well. I think that's part of the problem.
Definitely. Do you have to be involved with any surgical procedures, or is that not your field?
No, well, not that. I've been told by people before that we've been in surgery before where people have sort of, I don't know if they're operating on the eye, and we're just tracking the responses to make sure they're not damaging anything. It's definitely not common. I've never been involved in it. And I don't think the other trainee in my department's been involved in it. But it was something that my line manager said to me when we arrived, was oh, you might have the opportunity to go to surgery. And I was very confused. And I was really? But nothing's been mentioned since. So I'm going to say no preliminary. I don't actually know.
Very little.
Yeah, definitely not a regular occurrence.
Who's the other trainee in your department? Are they a second year or a third year? Are they with you in our
She's in third year. So she finishes this year, but she's managed to get a job in the department, so she's stuck around.
That's nice. It's nice for you to have someone else to kind of bounce ideas off and things.
It's honestly great to have another trainee in the department. Yeah, it just makes such a difference. That kind of bouncing ideas off of people, just reassurance that
Yeah, definitely. Has your hospital taken trainees before her as well, or are they quite a new training centre?
She was the first for my specialism, but they've been I think we've got quite a well-established training program. So we have what's known as the Northern Training Consortium. So it's kind of the northeast of England, when we're in contact with quite a few other trainees across that kind of area. For specific specialisms, I think it's mostly to do with medical physics and engineering related ones. And like I said, our department just happens to come under medical physics, part of the clinical measurement department. So we're involved in that. But I know obviously in Newcastle we have geneticists that just started this year, and they're I don't think technically classed under the NTC, but we sort of take them in sometimes for extra training and stuff. But there's that kind of networking, so it's definitely a pretty well established training centre, and there's definitely lots of support.
Mm. Are there many other trainees across the country in your specialism?
So this year they've taken on 4 of us. One was an in-service, and then just they only signposted 2 positions on the STP website as far as we're concerned, but something happened somewhere along the line, and a 3rd position just appeared in London in the Moorfield Eye Hospital. I don't think anybody knew it was a place. So one of the trainees got given the slot there. So it was very strange. Like, none of us really knew what kind of happened. I remember we were at uni, and said he was surprised to see me because he got told that the Newcastle position wasn't a thing anymore. And it was very confusing. We were all just a bit like, what's happened?
That's really strange. It's like something's not quite gotten.
Yeah, it was just really weird. Nobody knew what was going on. We were like, what?
That would stress me out. I'd be like, is my job like actually still a thing, or am I going to be told in like 2 weeks that?
Yeah. Well, that was the thing is, obviously, because you're first year as well, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
You applied in 2020, and we had the situation where they ranked our applications, and then so for us there was only 2 places, so it was the top 2 applicants that were getting interviews, and I was 4th, so I was like, wrote myself off. Like, in the email, I was like, and because they said they were kind of confirmatory as well, interviews, like, it wasn't likely that the people were going to get rejected. So I was a bit like confused, but obviously if then another space came up, and I don't really know what happened, to be honest. I'm just grateful to have my sleep. I got my interview and it went well, so. That's
good. Maybe someone like got a position but then realised that they couldn't move or something, like logistically, especially with last year.
And the pandemic and everything, you couldn't really blame someone.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So did you have much, you said that it's like pretty much all like patient centered and stuff, which makes sense. Did you have much like communication like experience in other roles before you started?
Communication wise, I mean, again, I kind of warned you about this, that I think I have quite a boring background when it comes to it. I just worked like a part-time job like in a supermarket in Tesco, like while I was at uni, and I've been working in sort of, I'm supposed to say patient facing, customer facing since I was like 16, and I think with the applications, like, there's some people that have really impressive applications and they've got kind of all the experience in the world, but I think it's about selling what you can and like what you actually have to give, because I think that's what they're looking for. And it's obviously easier sometimes to sell things when you've done exactly what they wanted you to do. But I guess it was just me taking that experience that I did have and showing like I did have to use similar skills that I might have to use in this situation too. Being
able to like move across. No one's gonna fit every single point of the person's specification, so you've just got to kind of sell yourself.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
Cool. So have you had your uni teaching as well? I know some different unis have done it slightly differently.
Yeah, so we've had well, they've all been online. My university is in Birmingham. I think most of the neurosensory scientists are in Birmingham.
I know audiology is. I think they do it at Aston.
Yeah. I think it's all of us so it'll be us, neurophysiology, and audiology. I don't think there's another course running elsewhere. I know medical physics is obviously a really big discipline, so they're split between universities. So yes, it's just been running as normal. So we had one block in October at the beginning, and then we just finished one about 2 weeks ago. It's been going well. I think the teaching, they're doing the best they can, and I think they're pretty supportive and responsive to our like questions and stuff. So
that's good.
It's been going okay.
That's good. So are your rotations then in neurophysiology, audiology, and I've forgotten the other one?
Clinical assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same kind of rotation. So I'm currently on rotation for clinical assessment. So I did a couple of days in neuroradiology, just looking at MRI imaging of like the brain in orbit. Although I only got to really see one orbit imaging because they're not as common as you would hope. So I did that kind of earlier in January, and then now I'm currently in the blood science labs, currently in hematology, and then I'm moving to biochemistry in a week's time.
That's exciting. They're quite like not what I would expect you to be grouped with, like doing some work in biochem.
Yeah, no, me neither, to be honest. And I'm a wee bit scared for it because biochemistry was never my like strong suit. The hematology stuff we're doing is really interesting. I really, really enjoy it. And all the words kind of make you sound dead smart, don't they? But I'm really enjoying myself in it. Yeah.
Is it all based at Newcastle? I feel like it's quite a big trust, or do you have to go anywhere else?
No, yeah, you're right. It's a really big trust, and I think especially with compared to like a lot of other trainees in certain situations, it's we're really fortunate that we have a lot of facilities in our trust that you can get most of your training done. I think, and if not within the trust, having that Northern Training Consortium also then benefits, because then our trust can reach out to other hospitals and trusts where they can send trainees to get the sort of experience they need.
Definitely. So have you had any of your uni assessments yet, or are they kind of later on?
Yeah, so our exam was pushed until May over the concern that people wouldn't have finished rotations, or they wouldn't have done like they wouldn't get the practical backgrounds and stuff like that necessary for the exam. So I know they pushed it into the summer. We've had two assessments handed in. So we handed in a essay that was like a literary review, and we did a presentation. And those were both during January. But we had a formative submission before, which was helpful because we got feedback then on like what we've done, and then we make our like summative submission.
So did you have to do the presentation over like Zoom, or just submit it?
Yeah, over Zoom. It was really weird.
That's odd.
I actually had to give a presentation this week in person. Like, it was only to like 3 people, but it was really strange. It was part of an interview. It was really strange because I don't think I've given a presentation in person in like a year.
Yeah.
Really like nerve-wracking even just being there in person. I was like, I've done this in a while.
Yeah. I'd be like, I'm just going to get a full face mask that covers my entire face.
Yeah, when I went in, they were like, oh, would you like to take off your mask? And I was like, no, I'm good.
Like on Drag Race, like, I'd like to leave my mask on, thank you. Incredible. So how has it changed at all with COVID? Like, are less people coming through, or has it not really affected your workload?
I think obviously I wasn't here during the first wave. During the first wave, I think they stopped routine appointments and they were only accepting urgent patients. So I think during that time it was really quiet. And then after the first lockdown was lifted, a lot of it I think was just catching up on those patients who hadn't been seen for a while. We currently in this lockdown still run routine and urgent patients, just kind of the service is normal. I know they've made changes to how we schedule in patients as well. So we're seeing sort of a set number of patients every day rather than just like trying to squeeze people in like sort of everywhere. It's slightly more organized, I think, now, which is, I think, it's been beneficial. I think we've seen an increase in like DNA, so like did not attend due to COVID, or they suspect it might be due to COVID.
Yeah.
But obviously, we're not really sure. So I think that's maybe the one thing, but I don't think we've looked into it in like an audit or anything formally. I think it's just a hunch.
I bet it is. Like everything at the moment, I just blame on COVID.
Yeah.
Not getting out of bed, COVID.
The middle of a panorama.
Yeah. It sounds a lot less like visceral than I thought it was going to be. I'm not going to lie. Like eyes are not my favorite thing in the world. So I was like, I hope it's not like really detailed surgery.
Not at all. Not at all. No. It's definitely. Yeah, I wouldn't worry if you're worried about being queasy or anything like that. It's definitely not that invasive. Not that invasive.
So when you kind of move on into second year, do you know what you'll be looking into then a little bit more, because they're your specialist modules?
Yeah. So we have. I could be getting mixed up between second and third year. I'd have to.
It doesn't matter.
I know my like first year modules, just like 1 year at a time. But I know we get to do a specialist electrophysiology module, which I'm really looking forward to, because obviously like that's ultimately kind of what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
I think we do specialist imaging module as well. I think there's an ultrasound module. yeah, no, I think it's what else is oh, this is terrible.
Don't worry, I wouldn't be able to name all of that.
Electrophysiology. Electrophysiology module. I'm gonna get to do an electrophysiology module.
No, I wouldn't be able to name all of ours. I really put people on the spot. I should tell people beforehand.
Yeah, ask for like a list of things.
Fab. So if you were going to, like, if someone asked you what they should kind of try to highlight in their application, what would you suggest?
So I guess my top tips would be, one, that kind of idea of selling yourself no matter what your experience is. I think trying to push the idea that you want to learn and you want to be there to learn, because they're not expecting you to be a qualified clinical scientist. That's the point of the program, is that you learn to become one.
Yeah.
And I think maybe if people are trying a little bit too hard to sell themselves as a clinical scientist already, you might kind of miss the target a little bit. So I think that would be a big piece of advice. I think, I'm not sure if this, again, because obviously our interviews were with our trusts, and so I don't know who was looking at the applications, if it was the trust that were looking at applications, or if it was the school that was looking at applications. But I think patient-centeredness, because obviously we don't get feedback on our applications, but something I noticed as a theme in my interview questions was a real push towards, how would you handle this situation? Like, it was like, what kind of challenges would you face in pediatric testing? What kind of challenges would you face in like geriatric testing? What kind of problems might you face in this situation, that situation? That's kind of what I felt was definitely being pushed a little bit more in my interview. And so I imagine maybe that was what was picked up on my application as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think for both things as well, like, you need to understand whether your specialism is going to be patient facing or not, so that you can like say that. Because I know a big thing in genetics is like, you don't, if you want to be working with patients and you say that in your application, like, you're not going to be. So
yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Like, know what you're actually applying for.
Definitely.
I think that was definitely good.
Yeah, hopefully. You'd hope that people did, but you never know.
Yeah.
Cool. So thank you so much for being a part of this. And we get quite a lot of like retinal dystrophies and stuff, I think. So it's quite interesting to kind of hear more about how they are then tested.
Yeah, like RP and stuff as well. Like, that's another genetic thing. And it's actually quite funny. It's RP runs in my family. Like, I think it's still linked, so like I'm not. But like, I think there's like these little things that have been like occurring in my life that I'm like, oh, like all of a sudden I'm here. It's just like a weird series of.
Yeah, definitely. There's always things like dominoes, isn't there, that get you to the place you end up in.
Definitely feels like that with this. Like, couldn't be happier. So
that's good. Have a fab rest of your weekend. And yeah, thank you very much.
Nice to have you.
Perfect. Thank you.